I'm going to be talking about some of the work that my colleagues and I have been doing in the CRM space, customer relationship management. So you're a brand, you have an app, you have a user base, you have a lot of reasons you want to communicate with them. Maybe you are nudging them to stay engaged in your app. Maybe you're trying to prevent them from churning. Maybe you're trying to recommend a product to them or try to let them know about a new product feature. There's a lot. There's anything that you could be communicating with your users about, and there's effective and less effective ways to do that. So because this feature space is so wide, it would be really intractable to try to personalize all of it all the time. So people tend to fall back on just running an A/B test on a specific message and then deploying it broadly. But we think that doing that is probably a not smart idea. We don't want to be assuming homogeneity in something as variable as a large group of humans. And I think I'm preaching to the choir to try to sell personalization to a recommender systems audience, but if you'll just bear with me, a lot of you have probably heard the story of the statistician who put 1 foot in a bucket of ice water and then 1 foot in a bucket of boiling water. And then when asked to report on how he was feeling, he said his average foot felt fine. So this is the moral of the story being that like an aggregate value can be misleading depending on the distribution of what you're talking about. But the worst case scenario is that it can be like actively harmful. So when you're running an A/B test like that, you might find this middle way that doesn't really appeal optimally to anyone in your audience. And if you think about all of the different dimensions that go into creating a message, this problem becomes compounded many, many times. So a message can have different targets as far as business use cases. So your users have different parts of the user journey that they're on. Maybe you have some users you'd like to have transact for the first time. Maybe you would have some users you want to upgrade their account. And maybe they're new, maybe they're old. This doesn't even take into account the many different elements of copy that can go into a message. So an element of a message, could have like a different value proposition, a different incentive, a different tone, a different call to action. We've really made a multifactorial problem trying to optimize all of this. And generally, this is where a CRM manager will throw up their hands and say, do an A/B test, maybe do a segment of the population. We'll let the cards fall where they may. But we don't think it has to be this way, of course. So we would like to suggest the idea of an agentic infrastructure to solve the problem of within user optimization. So specific agent per user, to select and execute message-specific agent per user, to select and execute messaging actions for one user, to assemble a message at go time as a function of what they know about the user's preferences historically. Users will provide that behavioral data to the agents by responding to the experiments that the agents try on them in the past. And then the agents will update their understanding of the user's preferences while also balancing exploration to maintain some attention to the dynamics of a user's preference. As an aside, we're using the term agent here, which carries a lot of baggage as something that has to be built on top of an LLM. We would like to suggest a broader but also more accurate definition of an agent as something that is just an autonomous, intelligent decider and executor. So more formally, we see an agent as an assembly of decision-making modules operating at the level of the individual user across multiple dimensions of user experience and adapting over time in response to evolving user preferences. So how do they do it? So in order to look at just the specific message, right, let's start down with just one message that one user got on Tuesday that had a lot of different elements to it. It had a value proposition of convenience as opposed to a value proposition of luxury, tone of humor. We look at the tone of humor. We look at that specific message with all of its tags, and we measure the effect of that message. We do that by taking a weighted sum of the events before and after the message. We're leveraging here a technique from econometrics called an interrupted time series. We weight these events based on how relevant they are to the revenue event that we're trying to drive, as well as how proximal the events are in time. So we have an exponential decay on how much the event is weighted either before or after the treatment. So what we have now is the agent has two sort of scores, two kinds of signals, the after treatment and then the steady state before. And we can look at that as one observation in an experiment about one of those components. So I said before, this is a value proposition of convenience, for instance. We can look in the user's history at all the times the agent has tried a message with a convenience value proposition, and then we can aggregate over all of those before and after signals. And what we've got now is something that we can use to define a posterior distribution for specifically the action set of different value propositions that we've tried. And we can use them to select which value proposition we're going to try next time. So say we've tried this value proposition of convenience on the user. We'll say this is the little red. I don't know if you can see my cursor. You can't. So let's say the little red envelope on the left is the value proposition of convenience. We'll say that the yellow envelope far at the right is the value proposition of luxury. There's sort of two parameters that we're inputting here to create this distribution. We've got the kind of general treatment effect, the ratio of post to pre, and that maps to the mean of the distribution that we've got. And that sort of in anthropomorphic terms corresponds to the agent's like expectation of the user's preference. And then depending on how many messages we've deployed, how much signal we have aggregated for that particular action, we can manipulate the variance of this distribution. So we've tried a lot, We've tried a lot of different convenience value propositions in the past, this red envelope, and that's a much more narrow distribution. So the agent in anthropomorphic terms is a lot more confident in its assessment, in its beliefs. So I'll go back one more time. Basically, the last element here is that, as I said, there are a lot of different elements that go into the creation of a message. So we just talked about value proposition, but there's also the tone, the greeting, to say nothing of the things outside of copy, like the timing and the channel. So each of those is their own modular Thompson sampling routine. We do a beta draw. We select the winning, or the agent selects the winning action from within that set, and then at go time recombines all of them to create a new experiment to run on the user to get more information. So the question is, obviously, does this work? So we tried it with one of our larger clients who are a multi-region, multi-vertical, multi-service app. It's very large. They had a couple of different use cases. They had some transaction-based use cases as well as some account upgrade-based use cases. And we compared it to their legacy CRM model, which is just an iteratively optimized rule-based system. And no matter how you slice it, no matter how you correct for multiple comparisons, in all of the product features and in all of the KPIs that we looked at, we saw a substantial increase in the dynamic AMP treatment over the iterative legacy control. So I would be happy to field any questions. We've also got a symposium this afternoon, and this poster is up, and we've got a little booth if you want to come ask us more questions. But all done.
If the agents are user-specific, how do you handle sparsity of data? Do agents learn from other users' agents? If yes, how different is it than from the normal recommended systems?
So we do talk about agents as kind of consulting with each other in the sense that we develop imputations for sparse elements there. So we don't know at the beginning, it's kind of a cold start, but as we begin to learn about the user base as a whole, then we are able to kind of come up with scores for missing actions. And how that differs from other recommender systems in general, like we are able to, it's not just the bandit choice for everybody, right? Like we are going to be able to kind of leverage at the margins. The more we learn about each specific user, we are able to kind of incorporate that very user specific information on top of that. So we're still presenting a net new.
What is the trigger for send?
The treatment?
Trigger. Yes.
So it depends. The agents are deciding that as well. So I talked about copy primarily, but where the agents are deciding that as well. So I talked about copy primarily, but we're also making decisions on our end about when the optimal time is to message a user based on their responses to different timings of messages in the past. So it's the same principle.